got it. You're all going to get a little pop-up that will say recording in progress. Just click yes. All right. So, hello. Thank you for getting here. And we're going to get started because we've only got an hour together. Like I said, in the next couple of minutes, a few more people might trickle in, and that's going to be just fabulous. But we're going to just offer everybody the kindness and the goodness that we would if we were all in person. People might be slinking in various times and have all sorts of various reasons for being a little bit late, and that's just totally okay. So, but meanwhile, we'll just get started. And we've got the recording. If there's people who you want to share this with later, that's completely okay. So, hi, thank you for coming tonight. I'm Krista. I'm Death's Apprentice is who I'm known as in my company, and I'm so excited to be with Megan Sheldon. Megan, wave. I'm going to just take a minute to go over a couple of Zoom things. I know we've been at this for a couple of years now, but you know what? Sometimes a little refresher. Like I just had a panic attack about not being able to find the record button. That doesn't happen often. So I'm just going to point out that what I'm doing right now is I'm watching you in what I lovingly call my circle of boxes, and you're all around me. And if you want to change that, if that's how you're watching all of us, that's fabulous. But you have control of this. So if you go up into the top right of your screen, you'll see something that will say view, and it will have a little bunch of boxes. And you can either change it to speaker or gallery or immersive. Immersive scares me, so I hardly ever do that. But speaker or gallery is how I generally end up in this space. And you can toggle between the two. When the recording happens, it'll be on my screen, so it'll look like this, that'll go out. And if you have any issues with that, then please just feel free to turn off your computers. I would warmly invite you, though, to actually stay on, because in this time, this last couple of years, we've experienced so much disconnection, and it's kind of lovely to just be with one another. So if you want to do that, that's just fine. For the beginning of our session together, let's stay muted. There will be absolutely opportunity to connect in with voice, and you're also always welcome to put any questions in the chat, okay? We'll try and attend to those as things go along, but we're also going to have a little bit of time at the end. So I think that takes care of the basics. Let's just take a moment to get here. And then, like I said, there might be a few more folks. Megan, while I'm doing this next little tiny bit, will you mind just letting anyone in if you see them? Thanks, love. So I'd like to begin by saying that I am so honored to be here on the historic, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples. That's the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and the Squamish people. They have stewarded and lived upon this land since time immemorial. And for me, I genuinely believe that, especially in this time of active and ongoing learning and reconciliation, it's important to do this more than just a box that we're checking at the beginning of a meeting, but to reflect upon what each of us can think about and learn in our lives, in our daily lives. So I invite you to do that, and I'm grateful that you will just accept this moment of doing this with me. I am a little bit selfish, so I'm going to spend a moment talking about myself before I introduce Megan. I have specifically not included a bio here because what I didn't want was that super awkward thing where somebody is sitting there with their little sheet of paper and reading and making like typos as they speak, as they're going through the introduction of the person who they know so well but didn't bother to read their bio in advance. And rather than doing that, what I really want to do is in just a moment, I'm going to invite Megan to tell us her story and frankly, her comic book origin story of Be Ceremonial. And I think you're going to get to know her through that so much better than you would through me reading 100 words of a bio. All right. Meanwhile, I'm Krista. I'm a funeral director. I'm an embalmer. I'm an end of life doula, and an end-of-life educator. I have a small company called Death's Apprentice, and I specialize in helping people become comfortable with thinking about, talking about, and importantly, planning for the reality of their mortality. I work with companies, I work with individuals, and I also, excuse me, and I also work on radio. So I have a program once a month on CBC, North by Northwest. If you haven't heard it, you can find it on my website, which is www.deathsapprentice.ca, and I would love you to go there. So that's it. That's the extent of the sales today. I just wanted to make sure that I got that in there. And what I'm going to start with is Megan. Megan, I know you so well, which is why I said I absolutely refused to read a 100-word bio. Can you help us? Can you kind of bless us with like the story of you, of Be Ceremonial, of what you have envisioned and what you have created?
How long do we have?
An hour.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. And for those watching the recording, it's nice to connect with you in whatever way we can these days. My story has many twists and turns. It's never been a straight line from A to B. And I think that's actually what's added to the complexity of the work that I do and the beauty of it all. I started my career in journalism, so I am a natural storyteller. I love listening, I love inquiring, I love catching stories and weaving them together. I started a brand storytelling agency, and I did that for 13 years, working with companies, mostly nonprofits, to help tell their story in different ways. I have a master's in cultural mythology, so I am a mythologist, which for me was really a bit of a spiritual quest. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but I don't follow a certain spiritual kind of path. So for me, the mythology connected me to my ancestors, to the history of the planet, to the way that people across culture, across time make meaning. They make meaning out of the experiences that happen to the world, to their community, to themselves, whether it's life, death, birth, marriage, divorce, all of the kind of milestones that occur across the life cycle. If you look into mythology, you really start to find the way that we have always brought ritual and ceremony into those moments. Um, so along the way of kind of, building businesses and working with people as a brand mythologist and storyteller, life happened to me, life and death. My husband and I had recurrent miscarriages. So we had 3 miscarriages in a row, and there was very little way of ceremonializing that. I didn't leave the hospital with any tools, with any remains, any way to say goodbye. I was just left on my own with that. At the same time, we were losing his father to ALS, which also was a series of invisible moments of grief. So receiving the diagnosis, watching his faculties leave him, his physicalness, all of it, the experience itself when he finally did die. You feel a lot of different emotions, and we don't really know that that's okay to feel all those emotions. We're kind of confused because the one way that we've been taught to do something doesn't really apply to most scenarios. So along the way of kind of building out my business, I started to create ceremonies for myself first, for myself and my husband, for our family, for friends. I had friends that lost parents, and they asked if I could help create a ceremony in their backyard. And at the end of the day, what it really was about was storytelling. So creating opportunities for people to feel comfortable to share their stories. People, if you ask somebody to tell a story, you'll always have the 1 or 2 people in the group who kind of jump up and talk quite buoyantly. And then you'll have the people that are a little bit more quiet and reflective. And those are the stories that we don't always hear in our society. So how can we use ritual to invite those people to also share stories in a way that's meaningful for them? So I started to really explore, what does it mean to have ritual and have ceremony in our life if we're not religious, if we don't have a strong cultural framework where this has been passed down. And those that have that, it's so beautiful. And I'm envious in so many
Me too.
ways. Yeah, and I think that's a common thing. But what I was really surprised about is when I kind of redefined ritual and ceremony for myself, I realized I had so much ritual in my life. Every year since I was 11, my father and I have gone on a road trip somewhere, and we listen to the same Neil Young song as soon as we get in the car, and we drive somewhere, and we have a dinner that night, and we play a game of cribbage. And like those are our rituals. And that whole kind of structure becomes our ceremony. It's our yearly ceremony that we hold together. So I started to rethink of ritual as not something that's prescribed, that's like follows a set kind of series of actions, which is you look at the Wikipedia definition, and I'm like, well, that's not really what I think ritual is. For me, it's simply an action that you take with intention and the hope of creating meaning.
Yeah.
So
And
what is,
there's that
yeah, go ahead.
difference, right,
Yeah.
between the ritual. I've actually heard you talk about it before as the, well, having your coffee every morning, and what that is compared to turning that into a ritual. Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
So I often say, like, people ask me what the difference is between a routine or a habit and a ritual. And I say you kind of fall into a routine. You just make your coffee the same way every day and you don't really pay attention to it. If you elevate it into the status of a ritual, you kind of step into the ritual. You fall into the routine and you step into the ritual. So you're intentionally making your coffee every morning, and maybe your dad made coffee every morning the same way, and you've kind of followed that same little ritual of pouring the beans in, and as they're grinding or as the water is boiling, if you make a cup of tea, you take that time to reflect on a person or a moment, or simply just to take a few deep breaths and prepare yourself for the day. You've turned that experience, that kind of mundane routine, into a ritual because you've been intentional about what you're doing and you've tried to create some meaning in that time. So it might be 30 seconds. It might be 30 seconds. It might be 5 minutes. I think that I'm a mom with two small kids. For me, it's about slivers of time. I don't have time every day for an hour-long daily ceremony. I take my 30 seconds where I can get them, and those 30 seconds become the things that sustain me. So then, go ahead, Krista.
Well, I think that point, exactly, of embedding into the life. You know that I kind of focus on end of life, so it won't be like off brand for me to talk, to get us eventually to end of life ritual. But I think what has so drawn me to you is that you are finding ways in this busy, new mom, not new, but still like littles, like you've still got actual littles in the world, and you're finding ways to incorporate ceremony into the full life, the full spectrum of life. And I'd love you to just, you were probably going to before I so rudely
No,
interrupted, but yeah.
no, I love the conversation. I have so much to say that I
I
could
know, I know,
talk.
and you've got like an hour.
um, so yeah, I think that if we think about a ritual as kind of that single action that has that intention, a ritual can stand alone. You can make your coffee every morning. That can be your morning ritual. When we start to think about a ceremony, it's a series of rituals strung together in a way that tells that larger story. So if we think about a wedding, if you think about a funeral, if you think about a birth, like there's three kind of main times in life when we're used to ceremony being embedded into it. So birth, marriage, and death. But there's so many other points along the way that could really benefit from ceremony. Receiving a terminal diagnosis, and creating a ceremony around that. Going through a divorce, coming of age, if when your kids kind of, when you look back on cultures around the world, and they created ceremony around these pivotal times, and for the most part, a lot of us have lost that, especially if we don't have, I looked often to the Jewish faith and bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and they do such a beautiful job of marking these times. So, I was kind of brought into the ceremony work. So I'm also a certified life cycle celebrant, which
Right.
basically means that I create ceremonies for other people. I met with a mom today who lost her son recently in a car accident, and I just shared. I listened. We talked about ways that we could honor him. She really wanted it to be a celebration of life, but she also wanted to hold space for the grief that we feel. And I think there's a
Right.
misconception out there that ceremonies have to be all one thing and nothing else. So we're going to talk about
Mm.
that a little bit later
We
about how
will. We
ceremony
have a good idea
will.
to talk about
Yeah.
that. Yes.
So yeah, if we think about, I kind of came into this through the end of life experience because that's where I saw the real void. I was like, wow, there's no ceremony for a miscarriage. There's no ceremony for a father receiving a terminal diagnosis. There's no ceremony for a death anniversary. You know, when it's been, we just had the 5-year death anniversary of having lost him. What do we do? What do we, there's no guidebook.
And where do we look? Because we're not religious, because we don't have
Yeah.
these goalposts and these signs and a book, literally a book to go and look for our answers in, right?
Yeah,
So this
not
is
yet.
where
It's
you come in.
coming.
Well, yes.
But yeah, and not only that, but we don't have our community, right? If you were really openly talking about death anniversaries with your neighbors and your group of friends, then you might realize that we're all struggling and we all have ideas. I talk to so many people all the time about what they do to honor a loved one on a birthday after they've died or a holiday. And time after time, you'll hear, "Oh, I'll cook their favorite cookie
Mm,
recipe,
mhm.
or I'll make their famous chili, or I'll play a song that reminds me of them, or I'll go for a drive and I'll just have no destination in mind. I'll just roll the windows down, and I'll just breathe in that fresh air." Those are all rituals. That's what you're doing. You're honoring that person. And as soon as you can reframe that in your head, that, oh, I do have rituals in my life. I do have these chances to create meaning. I think you'll start to realize that you're a lot more ceremonial than you might have known. And then you start to flex that muscle. So that's what I
Yes.
often talk about, is if the more we kind of embed these small daily rituals into our life, when something big or scary or hard happens, we already have those muscles built up. So we can say, okay, I've received a terminal diagnosis for myself. How am I going to approach this? Well, look, I have these rituals I've been already gathering. I can share these with my friends and family to help them through this experience as well. So there's just quite often the birth and death are the ways in for people that become celebrants and ceremonialists, because they're the two thresholds. They're the times when we're kind of entering and exiting and kind of questioning, and there's so many unknowns. But there's so many points in between that in that life cycle that to me deserve to be ritualized. They were begging for ceremony. My kids are 4 and 6, and they're so naturally ceremonial. Every
Right.
time we leave a vacation spot, they're like, "Oh, let's create a ceremony to say goodbye to Hornby Island and thank Hornby Island for this, and we'll go down to the beach and we'll do something really simple." I think that's my biggest hope for everybody today, is to realize that it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It doesn't have to have a lot of planning. You can introduce rituals into your life in a very simple, accessible way, and you can start doing it tonight.
Well, and we will start doing it tonight. But let me push a little bit with the kids. This isn't because they're Megan Sheldon's kids, right? This is actually something that's innate for us, but that we are somehow disconnected from. That's my hot take on the matter. Are you in agreement with that?
100%. I think it's
Yeah.
it's a little bit, I see being ritualistic as being, it's like a creative expression.
Mm.
It's artistic. And we think about how kids see the world, they're so creative and artistic. And that gets kind of drilled out of them as they go through the traditional school system, or they go into a profession where we're kind of boxing them up and we lose that kind of magic. In mythology, we call it the mythos. There's the
Mhm.
logos and the mythos, the logic and the myth. The logic kind of world has really dominated, especially in our Western culture. And we've lost that make believe, that myth world where, we hear myths today and we're like, oh, that's not true. I'm like, well, it's not true through the logos, through the logic side, but it's not about that kind of truth. It's about what you believe and what you feel.
It's about
So
it always comes back to beliefs and values. And yeah, as a funeral director, I used to sit with families who would say to me from all sorts of different backgrounds, because I'm lucky to be serving here in Vancouver, where really we have quite a multicultural background. And I would often get folks in front of me who looked a lot like me. They were probably from my background, maybe even my hometown and things like that. And they would say, "Well, what do I do? What do I do now?" And that question around what do I do? It's like there's something right and something wrong. And I've often said, you know what, this is the one quiz that you're going to get 100% on. That you know all the answers to, and probably only you know the answers to, but we're looking for someone to tell us and guide us because we haven't necessarily, because we've strayed from
Mhm.
these guideposts. And so in the end of life space, I definitely find you said that it's at the beginning and the end that we might weasel our way in, folks like us, right? You probably didn't say the word weasel. I will guarantee you didn't say the word weasel. But in the beginning and end is where we have this natural reflection, right? And so I wonder how can you what was your vision really with Be Ceremonial to help us answer that question, what should I do now? Is that part of your vision for Be Ceremonial?
Yeah, so I kind of got to the beginning of or the end of one story, and then I haven't quite started the next. So I'll backtrack 2 years ago. COVID, the pandemic hit. My husband is in tech. He's a CTO, and he was working for a travel startup. So we knew within 2 weeks of COVID hitting that this was not going to fare well. Sure enough, 3 weeks in, he lost his job. We pulled our kids out of daycare. We kind of battened down the hatches and we thought, okay, what is it that we want to build with our life? We've been given this opportunity, this gift of time to create something. We've always wanted to build something together. We're kind of the yin and the yang side of and so we started to really think, okay, Johan was really interested in the work I was doing, and it was starting to really pick up. I'd been doing it for about 8 years. But the 2 or 3 years before COVID, I started to get a lot more inquiries. And every time I'd meet with somebody, they would say, oh, I didn't realize I had so much ritual in my life, or I didn't
Mm,
realize how, you help remind me. And I always say, we're not here to teach people, we're here to help them remember, because ritual is innate in us. It's innate in who we are as human beings. So Johan and I really started to think, what is it that we could offer the world? We're two people in a small little home in North Vancouver, British Columbia. What can we build that will add value to the experience that people are seeking? So we started to envision an app, a platform, bringing together technology and the kind of sacred ceremony work I'd been doing. And we were very intentional with how we've done that. But we wanted to give people the tools to start, because if you're coming out of the hospital after a miscarriage, or if you've received a terminal diagnosis, or if you're going through a divorce, or you've lost a job, or you're turning 50 and you want to create a ceremony to celebrate, we want to give people a place to start. So we're not here to be prescriptive. We're not here to tell you how to do it, but it's like a choose your own adventure experience. And I will screen share a little bit later just to show you what's possible. But for us, it was really about just inspiring people and being like, oh, we can take that. And now we can turn that kind of ritual that somebody else has kind of offered, and we can make it our own, and we can adapt it to reflect our needs. I've been hosting dozens of Zoom memorials and Zoom celebrations of life the last 2 years. And we did not know what we were doing those
no.
first few months. It was the Wild West a little bit, but it was amazing. And I tell you that there are some things that happened during those, 2 hour Zoom calls with 300 people joining from around the world. And we created rituals to connect people across the screen and to celebrate a life in a way that we hadn't done before. And it was so meaningful to so many people. And those people might not have flown to be at an in-person service.
Right.
So it really did kind of open up the possibilities. But people were also like, oh God, how do I even create a Zoom memorial? Where do I start? So we thought, well, let's add that to our app. Let's give people a guidebook. Like you said earlier, when I came out of the hospital, there was no guidebook on what to do. So we thought, let's create that guidebook and let's have it be really open-ended and really custom so people can create their own experiences, and let's see what happens. So that's what
So,
we've
as
built.
somebody who has used the app a number of times as a funeral director and dealing with folks uh, who say, "Now what?" One of my absolute go-tos is actually go over to Be Ceremonial because it is kind of a I don't mean to make light of this, sorry, but it's kind of a choose your own adventure scenario, isn't it? And I think
Mhm.
you've really dialed in on the not being prescriptive. There is this incredible ability to I don't know. Can you show us just for
Now, yeah,
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Let me share. Go. Everybody see? Hi,
Hi,
Megan.
Megan.
There we go. All right. So you would sign up for an account. It's for free for now. You sign up for a free account. You can download it in the App Store. You can access it on your browser or on your phone. So there's two kind of main pillars to the Be Ceremonial experience. One is the ability to create a ceremony for yourself, or you can gift it to somebody else. And the other one is to learn about ceremony. So if you want to kind of go deeper. Then we also kind of give you a little update. We offer free monthly workshops for all of our members, so they can kind of learn about what we're up to. So if you want to create a ceremony, you would click here. And then you have every month we offer a different free ceremony. Right now, especially with what's happening in the United States, we felt it was really important that we offered a ceremony for those who have had an abortion at some point in their life or recently, so they can create a ceremony to acknowledge and honor their own experience. If you've had a pregnancy loss, you can create these types of ceremonies. Fertility, so everything from mother blessings, which is kind of like a baby shower, but with less gifts and
More
more
emotional
feelings.
gifts. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you make the decision to end breastfeeding, we're really building out this kind of middle section over the next few months. So weddings, if you are going through menopause, the croning ceremony, which is kind of that third stage in life. And a lot of women have really embraced this kind of third stage. So how do you create a ceremony when you're, around 55 or 60 or 70 years old? How do you kind of create a ceremony to intentionally step into this next stage? If your relationship is ending or if you're closing the year. So we're going to be adding new ones here, especially around health and aging. So if you have
Mm.
a mastectomy or a hysterectomy, I've done a lot of ceremonies for people around organ transplants. That will be coming soon. And then obviously the end of life stuff. So if you receive a terminal diagnosis or you want to plan a living wake. So I work with a lot of families who choose medical assistance in dying. So a lot of people want to have a funeral before they die. What does that look like? How can they create something that feels like them? And where do they start? Sitting vigil. So obviously that's for those who might not know, those are the kind of the few hours, a few days leading up to a death. What are some rituals you can bring into that space that might support both the person who's dying and the community around them? Time of death and home funeral. So these are kind of the acute kind of phases surrounding death and dying. And then there's the grief and legacy. So how do
Mm.
you plan a memorial service, a celebration of life, scattering ashes, death anniversaries, pet loss? So pet loss has been a big one, and I'm facing that decision, unfortunately, in the next little
Mm.
while. So I'm well aware of that. But could I, if anybody wants to add to the chat, if there's a ceremony you want me to show you, if there's something that kind of, or Krista, if you have one in mind that you'd like me to take everybody through.
Yeah, well, I tend towards the EOL space, you know me.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm leaning towards something around the home funeral or or something that you would be really comfortable in with like the medical assistants or something, because these are things that really speak to me. But there could be others in the room who want to see something else, so I'm okay with that.
Well, why don't we start with home funeral, just because
Sure.
so say you had a loved one who died and you wanted to hold a funeral at home, you would click here. And you can choose to create the ceremony for yourself, or you can gift it and send it to somebody else. So if you want to create your own ceremony, just one off, it's around $7. But if you don't want to, have someone else to incur that cost, you can pay for it and then send them a gift. So you would click here and say the gift is for your friend Marina, and you would then create the ceremony. And then you would copy this and send this link to Marina and say, I know you're planning a home funeral for your mom who just died. Or maybe you're an end of life doula and you have a client named Marina and you would like to kind of offer her some support. You would then copy this link and send it to her. This is what she would receive when she opens that link. She would be welcome to be ceremonial. It kind of gives a bit of a look at what ritual and ceremony is, how to build your own ceremony. I won't go through all of this because I
No.
invite everybody to go, but you would then kind of go and build your own ceremony. So there's 4 kind of ways that ceremonies often happen. One is a solo ceremony. So for those who want to just do something on their own, maybe there's, they're introverted or there's not a lot of family around, but they want to create something for themselves. Maybe you want to do it with your partner, a husband, a wife, a friend, a child, a coworker. You can create a group ceremony or a virtual ceremony.
Oops.
So let's say that the home funeral is going to be a group. And then you get to kind of pick and choose. So I framed the experience of a ceremony, and there's always an opening ritual, something that kind of tells people, okay, you're stepping into this ritual setting. We're going to now, help our nervous system be like, okay, like I'm leaving behind the conversation I was just in or the food I was just eating, and I am now intentionally stepping into this ceremonial container. So we often look to the elements, so earth, water, fire, air, or the senses. So let's say sound. You can click here and you can learn a little bit more about this. And maybe there's a song that you want to play. So maybe for a home funeral, you might have a violinist that is there live, or maybe there's a favorite classical song, and you simply put that song on and invite people to gather around, and they will naturally, you'll start to see their parasympathetic nervous system just settle because they think, okay, the song is now the opening. It's inviting us into this space. And then there's 3. We suggest choosing 1 ritual per section. There's usually a ritual that acknowledges the past. So what was? This is the idea of something, releasing something or letting something go. The morning walk is a really beautiful one. This is the idea of either in a forest or in nature or in a backyard or through a house, finding photographs or mementos and hanging them along a path and inviting people to walk through that path slowly, looking at the different things that you've intentionally placed around them so that they're kind of walking through somebody's life. So you might choose that one. So let's say we choose sound and we choose the morning walk. There's a bunch in here. Again, this is the choose your own ritual adventure. You can kind of go through and see the one. Bathing the body. Christia's talks has talked about this a lot, like how important it is for our grieving process to spend time with our loved ones after they've died. And our society has become so death phobic and so death denying that the idea of touching a body, the idea of bathing a body has somehow become gross or unhygienic. And we're missing out on such a beautiful ritual. So you can click here and this kind of gives you the ingredients that you would need. And it takes you through just some gentle guidance. Again, it's not prescriptive, it's
Right.
descriptive. So you can take this and make it your own. You could pick that one. And then you think about, okay, what's the 3rd stage of the ceremony is a ritual for what will be when we leave this home funeral. What are we going to carry with us? And one of my favorites is this legacy jar here, where you have an empty jar and you invite people to write their wishes or their memories or a single word that connects them to the person who died, and you put it in a jar. And then later on, when you're missing your person, when you're wanting to connect with them, you open the jar, you pull out a word, and you've been given this little gift from somebody, a memory that they connect with that person. Maybe it's a favorite food, something that's in the jar, and you can put it back in and open it up back when you want to kind of reconnect with them. So you would choose that one. And then finally, just like the opening is so important, so is the closing. You want to kind of have that closing of the door so that people then can leave the ceremonial space and go back to having their hors d'oeuvres or talking about the weather, whatever it is. But kind of closing that ceremony, you can close it the same way you opened. So if you opened with a song, you can close with a song, or you can invite in something different. So maybe you invite maybe everybody has sparklers and you invite them to light them, or maybe you had lit a candle at the beginning of the ceremony and you simply blow it out to close it, and you invite everybody to not move, not talk, but wait for the smoke to dissipate and the wax to harden, and you invite them just to kind of settle themselves. And as soon as that kind of candle has been extinguished, then you move on, and that ceremony is complete. So you would then save your ceremony, and it kind of tells you all the things you need to gather and prepare. This is the event planner in me. I would hate somebody to have a ceremony and like arrive and be like, oh no, we're doing this ritual and we forgot the washcloth or the jar. So it just tells you what to do ahead of time. You can print this out and then you open your ceremony and it just kind of guides you through what you've chosen. You can use it on your phone or you can print it out ahead of time if you don't want to have any technology in your ceremonial space. So that's what you would be given. It then sits in your library so you can access it. The Learn section, which I talked about at the beginning, has a bunch of, this is where we're going to be building it. We're going to be adding a lot of audio and visual workshops in here. But for now, they're written kind of tutorials and stories from the community. So people that are using our app, they send in stories about what they've created. And we all learn from each other because I
We
think
really do.
at the end of the day, that's my hope, is that I don't want to be the one sitting here telling everybody how to create ceremony. I want this to be a community initiative. My vision for all of this is for it to be us all sharing what, we all took the same 5 rituals and everybody had a ceremony that was so unique and different. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about what worked or what was challenging. So, yeah.
In my work with folks in terms of holistic advanced care planning, I will legacy and the what I always like lovingly call the most important paperwork, in quotes, maybe one day I'll TM it, is the non, it's not the will, and it's not the representation agreement, and it's not all of that sort of legalistic nonsense. It's actually this non-prescriptive and beautiful and innate stuff, the things that we know, but that we have become distanced from and need a little bit of a reset on. I've heard you talk about legacy keeping and in the EOL space. What does that mean to you? How does that work into ritual and ceremony?
Yeah. Again, if we come back to that idea of rituals for what will be, I think
Mm.
that there's a few things that happen in our society, and having, convened dozens, if not hundreds of ceremonies for people around the world, um, especially around end of life. We either get stuck in the past and we kind of get focused on that and we forget to be present. So finding a ritual to help ground people and make them present in the moment. Almost every celebration of life that I host in person these days, even on Zoom, I get people to just kind of close their eyes and to listen to the sounds around them, to feel the sun on their face, to, notice the taste in their mouth. And that simple experience, that little ritual of checking in with yourself, but doing it in a community environment is
Yeah,
so
so
beautiful.
powerful. Yeah.
And then also the rituals for what will be. So, what are we creating that is going to sustain us beyond the ceremony? Because I don't know if everybody else has felt this, but you'll go to a beautiful wedding or a beautiful celebration of life, and you'll leave, and you'll be like, well, now what? What am I supposed to do? So, one example of a simple legacy keeping that I offered was everybody was invited to bring a flower to a Zoom memorial in honor of a woman who died who loved to garden. And we all held our flowers up to the screen as the song, her favorite song, played, and we created a garden for her through our little Zoom screens. And that was beautiful. And that was a present. That was, all of us being together. And then I invited everybody to take their flower that day or then that week and to go into their community and to find somewhere to place that flower. They could throw it into a pond, they could place it on a bench, they could bury it, they could put it somewhere public. And then to share the story back with the family. And the family told me that for months they would get little emails from people saying, oh, I forgot to tell you, I placed my flower on this bench. And over the next few weeks, other people placed flowers next to it. And it
Wow.
became this beautiful symbol of people's grief and the mourning that was taking place. And somebody else told me, they sent an email that said, I threw my flower into the pond near my house, and every day I would walk by it and I would see it was still there. It had drifted or got caught in some branches. But that became part of the legacy from the ceremony. People sharing beyond the actual 1 hour that we spent together. They were able to feel permission to
Yes.
continue to grieve and not have it feel like something that felt, oh, I've done my grieving. I had that ceremony. Now I'm done. It was almost like, well, no, I'm living with the grief. I'm inviting it into my everyday. And that grief is a reflection of my love. And that grief is human and it's not something we should run away from. And I remember somebody telling me from that same story that they were sitting on a bench with their flower and they were crying, and somebody came and sat next to them and asked them to tell them,
Like,
about their
how
friend
are
that
you?
died.
Kind of.
And
Yeah.
for 20 minutes she got to share the story of her friend with a complete stranger.
Right.
And so the ripple effects from that, they just kept going. So that's for me
Oh,
what legacy keeping is. It's creating rituals that sustain and support us in the longer term.
isn't that incredible? And you know, birth is an event, but it's also an experience. And death is an event, but it's also an experience. And everything in between. What really resonated for me there was when you said like, and we were still allowed, we were given permission to hold that grief and to carry it for some time into what will be. And I think for me, working with you, I've actually, to the group who doesn't know me, I need Megan in my life so badly because I don't have enough woo in my life, and Megan is the perfect balance of like really getting shit done and also really just being able to embrace these things that kind of scare me and that I tend to push back from sometimes. I have in my role as a funeral director in particular, I have so often, back in the before it was an actual app, when it was just a web-based app, I have so often used it to send to people as gifts and to say, here, please go and look at this. And then when I would later work with people at their actual event and ceremony, I'd be like, oh my God, that's a be ceremonial thing that just happened there. And sometimes that legacy keeping piece that you've just spoken of was something that I would recognize so much later that was happening. So like incredible gift. I know like we're getting close to our hour, but you said that you were pretty sure you could work an actual ceremony with us
A
into this
ritual.
event. Sorry, an actual ritual. Sorry. Oh,
That's
see, need
okay.
more of you in my life. Um, and you said that. Is that still true? Do you think you
Yeah,
could
we've
do
got
that?
time. Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Do that with it. Take us through that.
So I'm a big, Krista refers to me as the woo. And I actually, I'm not very, and that's the part where I've always kind of been challenged with spirituality is, um, you know, it- I've been gifted crystals that I have been told will do special things for me. And they do, I guess somebody gifted me some rose quartz and told me it can open my heart up and with love. And I thought, well, I don't think the crystal is doing it, but I think the person that gave me that and imbued that into it, that's what I feel. And so I can literally, I have a rock here on my desk that has 3 hearts on it in honor of my 3 babies that I lost. And I can hold this rock and it grounds me and it connects me to them and it connects me to myself and it lets me know that I haven't forgotten them. So for me, you can literally find a pine cone on
Yeah.
this, in your backyard or a rock on the beach, or buy a very beautiful crystal that, holds certain properties and they all are meaningful. So one of my favorite go-to rituals, which we've got about 2 minutes. So this is what we're going to do is the idea of holding polarities. So we are often taught that when we are feeling joy, we should not be feeling grief,
Mm.
or when we're grieving, we should not have laughter and joy. At least that was my experience. That was my kind of the cultural story that was being told around me. So that when I was grieving and I felt moments of joy, I felt so guilty and I felt almost ashamed that I had forgotten to be sad. And it's my biggest gift to myself over the last couple of years has been this ritual, and it takes just a few minutes. And if everybody wants to join me, you don't need any tangible objects, although you can cut out a piece of paper for another time if you want to use it. But I'm going to invite everybody just to settle in and get kind of comfortable. If you want to close your eyes, it sometimes helps just to kind of focus you, but you're welcome to keep your eyes open if you like. And I want you to take your left hand and I want you to kind of gently close it. And I want you to imagine some of the grief that you're holding today. And I want you to connect that grief. Maybe it's grief that you're holding for yourself. Maybe it's grief that you're holding for someone else. Maybe it's grief for this world that we're in and all the things that are happening that feel so out of control. And I want you to hold that grief gently in your left hand. And I want you to notice how heavy it feels or how light it feels. Is there a part in your place in your body where you're feeling that grief the most? Notice it. Invite it in. Is there a color or sound that you associate with that grief? And I want you to just for a minute to acknowledge it and to honor it and to let it be. And then I want you to take your right hand and gently folding it up, I want you to hold your gratitude. I want you to think about what you're grateful for in your own life, in the lives of those that surround you, in this big, beautiful world. I want you to feel that gratefulness and hold it gently in your right hand. And notice how it feels, how heavy or light it feels. Where in your body does it connect with? Is there a smell or a taste that gratefulness brings up for you? And then I want you to allow yourself just to sit with that gratefulness for a moment. Acknowledge it, honor it, and let it be. And finally, I want you to bring your hands together wherever you want. You can have them in your lap. You can hold them up by your heart. You can hold them high in the sky. And I want you to take your grief and your gratitude, and I want you to hold them together and take a few deep breaths. And just give yourself permission to feel both at once. They don't need to compete with each other. They're not in contrast to each other. They can both simply be two sides of the same coin. And invite them into your life. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and give your hands a shake. And that I have coins. I take a piece of paper and I write one word on one side and one word on the other, and they're polarity. So sometimes it's my grief and my gratitude. Sometimes it's my anger and my my love, my compassion. But we're often kind of always fighting against these polarities. And I do it almost every day. I'll sit with both and I'll just remind myself that that's the human experience, to have these seemingly opposing emotions holding the very same breath. And my daily ritual, my ritual muscles that I'm flexing, if I can give myself more permission to hold those at the same time, then when I show up with a family like I did today in a grieving space, they're feeling multiple emotions themselves. So I want to be able to show up and hold that with them.
Megan, can you imagine if we had ritual and ceremony gyms on every corner and in every strip mall? The way you talk about the flexing the muscle, this is, so similar to meditation or to other work that we can do as people trying to strengthen our mental and physical health. And I think this is just so incredibly important for that strength and for that deep deep connection. So I am so grateful. Barbara has just popped in the chat that just having awareness of the language of ritual and ceremony has helped me re-remember so many things I have done in my life and will inform so much in the future. That is that is just lovely. And you know what? We actually do have a few minutes now if anybody would like to, and I'd warmly invite you. We're not a huge group, so I would warmly invite you to unmute. If you're feeling a little shy, you could also just pop something in the chat, or you could wave your hand or put up the little hand signal down at the bottom. But I'm sure I've had a million questions, and I've known Megan for a long time. You haven't necessarily known her for as long as I have. So if you have a question for her, I would love this. This would be the chance, and we can just be
Yeah.
quiet for a
Or
little.
a reflection too from your
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yes,
Yeah.
obviously, just a reflection.
Barbara,
Would
yeah.
I mean, just to kind of build on what I wrote, I have a son who died 11 and a half years ago, and over the years, on various dates and what have you, I have very mindfully done things, written letters that I've read down at the beach and then set them on fire. When we travel, I always bring a little red leather pouch with some of his ashes, and I will sprinkle some of his ashes in meaningful places or beautiful places. And just as I was saying, just re-remembering those things from this perspective has just given it even more depth. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I can picture you on the beach just having that moment with him. And the more we normalize that and the more we share that with people, I just think that's such a gift to the way that we're all grieving so much. And many of us don't know what to do with it, but we are doing things and we are doing enough. And
yeah,
I think the biggest thing my hope is not to add one more task where we have to, oh, I have to do more. But it's like remembering that we are doing these. We have ritual embedded into our life.
And
Thank you.
and I think that people really, sometimes we feel shy about doing it. Like we went over to Ireland, where my husband's from, when my mother-in-law died, and I brought some of my son's ashes, and we spent every summer over there. And I said, I want to go down to the jetty at the yacht club and I want to spread some of his ashes. The whole family came. And a guy who was there who didn't know us at all said, "Oh, let me take pictures of you
yeah.
so that no everybody." And people, they just, I was like, "Oh, how are they going to be about this?" They loved it. They loved it.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's always this gorgeous sort of quiet that happens. I've noticed in my time getting to know Megan that um, having a ritual will put you into this contemplative state that we will enter into quite willingly, even though we didn't know we could or would do that at the end of a webinar or something like that. And so I am so immensely grateful for the fact that you were not only able to just kind of like show us a little bit about the nuts and bolts of Be Ceremonial, like that's spectacular, but to actually guide us through that in these last few days or a couple of weeks in particular in world news. Things have been a little challenging and a little heavy, and then to have small joys like my little great niece who is Do you know you learn to laugh? Like you forget that as a middle-aged lady that you actually have to learn to laugh, right? But gosh, when you see a baby doing that, you remember they are just figuring it out and they are quite delighted by that whole thing. And it's amazing how you can just fall into that delight. And then you accidentally turn on the news and you're like, "Oh, falling into something altogether different." So that what I'm struck by is how quickly you can create that space for yourself and create that intentionality in that moment of ceremony that is elevating and at once elevating and does that even make sense? Both elevating
Mhm.
and grounding at exactly the same time.
I think that's what's happening right now, and has been for many years. But we're really at the culmination of it all. Is I don't know if anybody here has heard about the word languishing,
Mm,
but it's this idea that we're not depressed, but we're not flourishing. We're kind of just we're just like kind of became the word of the pandemic because people were just like, what is this thing I'm feeling? It's like, oh, I'm just languishing. I'm just going through the day. I'm just doing the motions. I'm tuning things off because I can't feel it all. Climate change, gun control, abortion, like all of these things. I can't take it in. So instead, I'm going to shut off and
mhm,
I'm just going to stop feeling. And it's such a dangerous, slippery slope and you need to recognize it in yourself. When you're in that time of languishing, how do you move back towards your aliveness? And Krista and Maria here know that every week for the last 2 years, I've led free community ceremonies here in Vancouver with cold plunging in the ocean. And it's not just about the swimming, it's about the community gathering on the beach. We witness each other. We all choose an object that reflects what we're holding that day and we throw it in the ocean and we walk into the sea in whatever way we each want. It's not a competition. We're not timing ourselves,
mm-mm,
but we are stepping towards our aliveness. We are creating a weekly ritual, a weekly ceremony where we are saying, okay, this week has been hard. What am I going to let go? What am I going to release? Just like Barbara on the beach when she's burning that paper. Like, what am I going to acknowledge to myself, to my beautiful community that often people come that we've never met before? They just kind of show up. Sometimes we have passerbyers on the beach who just join in. And I think that we're craving that. We're all like, how do we step into that aliveness, that feeling of today matters? I don't need to make the biggest memories. I don't need to make this like the Instagram worthy kind of
yeah.
photos and stuff. It's not about that. It's just like, how do I create some meaning in my hour, in my minute, in my day? And how can I do that with ritual? And if we, again, that ritual muscle, if we start stepping towards that aliveness, when we face death, which we all will, whether it's when it's for ourselves, when it's for those that we love. Yeah, I've had more loss in my life than I can believe some days. And yet that is almost pushing me towards that aliveness more. So that's my invitation for everyone is to really think about where you're at today and what are some rituals that can really bring you into that flourishing, into that kind of stepping into your own aliveness. And Krista does a beautiful job through her planning. So when you think about advanced care planning, it's like, oh, I've got my will sorted. I've got things kind of all, buttoned up. That's not really, that's only part of it. How do you want people to remember you after you died, after you're gone? Where do you hope they'll take your ashes to? What do you hope they'll feel when they see a sunset or when they see a hummingbird? What are the symbols? What are the archetypes? What are the mythologies that you can help create when you're alive, so that when you're dead it just becomes so much easier for people to walk with that grief?
Mm, mm. So beautiful. I want to just stay on for like another 3 hours and just talk to you and listen to your wisdom. Every time, and I'm lucky enough to get to have coffee or wine every now and then with you, but every time I'm like, oh, I just want more. And I feel like I'm pretty confident in saying probably most of the folks in this room are feeling the same way. I am so grateful for this time that you've spent and for what you've shared with us, but I'm also with us, with like the 14 people in the room. I'm incredibly grateful for the gift that you and Johan have created in Be Ceremonial and that you make available for free and that is just out. It's like freaking an app that just blows my mind. Like it's literally right there. Um, Thank you for that, and
Yeah.
thank you for this hour. Would you be comfortable just popping like the in into the chat just so that people can figure out how to like find you on Instagram or whatever your
Yeah.
preferred method is?
Well, the
Because
other
we
invitation I have too is for anyone, I don't know if everybody here is in Vancouver, is local, or if you kind of, no, oh, anyway,
I
if you
forgot to
are,
do that. That's right.
if
I'm
you are,
sorry.
yeah,
Oh,
if you are in Vancouver, and you ever want to come on a Sunday ceremony, which is our version of church, which involves the ocean and people, men, women, all ages. We gather on the beach. I also host free grief walks in the forest. From time to time, when we all just can kind of meet and go on a grief ritual walk, and I kind of quietly embed 3 different rituals into the walk. So yeah, that's always an invitation if you find yourself in Vancouver. I also love connecting over Zoom, over the phone, over email. So I'll put my email in the chat as well.
oh, that's generous. Thank you.
But this work is very, I get fueled and fed by connecting with people. And I work at home with my husband all day long. So reach out.
And for 2 years, there was homeschooling too.
Yeah, all of it. So I am a
Oh,
social being. So I just love being in community. That is when I am my happiest. So yeah, it was so lovely to be here with you all. And Krista, as always, I just,
I'm so grateful.
anything you ask me to do, I'll say yes.
I know she does. Oh, I'm so blessed by that. I'm so blessed by your presence. We did record this tonight, and so there were actually quite a number of folks who didn't manage to get on for one reason or another. So that'll be available to them. And if you'd like to have it, I will send out afterwards so that you can share with folks if you would like. I'm so grateful you made time on what is, I'm sure, a busy evening, a busy summer evening. So thank you for that. And thank you for being here. If we could just take a minute now to, in whatever way works for you. Annie, there is further info about the beaches. Kind of switch a little bit. Um, so there are ways. I'm going to invite you to reach out to Megan, okay, and get the actual specific details on that info because it morphs a little bit and it moves a little bit. You got to be in the know, but it's spectacular. So I would like just before we go, I know we're just 3 minutes over time, but before we go, in whatever way works for you, if you could just take a moment to share with me the gratitude that I'm sure we're all feeling for Megan and this hour and her contribution in this world. For me, I'm going to just rub my hands together and send her all the love that I'm feeling right now. And whatever works for you, do it with me. Megan, I'm so grateful. Thank you times a million. And I know some of you, there's a number of you that I've never met in my life. And if any of you want to reach out, I am at hello@deathsapprentice.ca. And I'm more just like Megan, don't have little ones at home that I'm homeschooling, but do work in a very small space at home and always looking for connection. So please feel free to reach out. All right. Thank you, my loves. Good night.
Bye, everyone. So lovely to
Bye.
meet you.